So we are moving into the Easter season. Easter is 4 weeks away from today. What's that? I'm going to. Thank you for reminding me. She's so good. Yeah, she's so good. And but she wants me to remind you that this light is not on this morning because the bulb burnt out. We got here this morning and flipped it on, and it wouldn't come on, and we looked at the bulb, and it had burnt out. And this light, just for those of you who might be new to us or don't remember this story, this church is 160 years old, 161 this year. For 70 of those years, a young lady then played the organ in this church for 70 years of her life. So think of that. Almost half the life of this church, just 20 years shy of the life of this church, one individual sat at that organ faithfully, serving the Lord quietly, Louise Moorhead. Right? And so her family had this light installed as a kind of a memorial to her, to remind all of us that there was a little light that shined in here for Jesus for 70 years at that organ. Isn't that just a beautiful story? And that's that kind of faithfulness and steadfastness. That's what characterizes this church in a lot. There are lots of those kinds of stories. But she wanted me to remind you that we didn't forget to turn it on. The bulb burnt out. So we filed a facilities management slip with John Clements. There's a form in there for you, and that we need the bulb replaced. he's already got it under control. So yeah. So as we're moving into the Easter season, I've shared this before. I like to do something different for Christmas and Easter every year, just to highlight the uniqueness of each of those seasons. And I don't ever want the resurrection story or the Christmas story to become something to us that's just rote. And, we just remember it and we move on. We just keep living our lives. Because truly, those two stories not only shape our lives today, they change the world. And we don't want to lose sight of that ever. So this year, what I'm going to do is take, like I did at Christmas, we looked at the Christmas story from the perspectives of Mary and Joseph. You might remember that. And then the wise guys, the three wise guys from the Middle East that came over, I guess, the far Middle East, that came and honored Christ, and we looked at their backstories and what these events possibly could have been like for them. I'm going to do the same with our Easter stories this year. And I'm going to weave into them not just the stories of John, Mark, and Mary, who we're going to be kind of focusing on these next few weeks, but your stories too. Because what happened in their lives impacts us. Mary met the resurrected Christ in the garden after his resurrection. We need to have an encounter with the resurrected Christ in our own lives today. So today, the message is called Turning Point, and it's going to we're in the last month of Jesus' life right before Passion Week, the week where everything comes to a head and ends. Well, it ends with him dying, but the next week begins with a glorious resurrection, right? You're not very excited about that. I mean, a glorious resurrection. Unexpected. People had no idea this was coming. Some of the people, the Pharisees who listened closely to him and didn't like him, remembered that, he said he was going to rise again, so put some guards by the tomb. Make sure that nobody can come and take his body out. That didn't work. So today, we're going to start this message, Turning Point, talking about the boy in the lamplight. And it's going to read like a story. It's not going to sound like a sermon with all the points and scripture and everything else. It's going to sound like a story. So, the lamps had already been lit. In Jerusalem, evening came softly, the last gold of the sun fading behind the western hills, while narrow streets filled with the sounds of families returning home. Doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed against stone. Somewhere nearby, bread crackled in a clay oven. Inside one house, a boy sat on the floor near the wall. His back resting against the cool stone, he held a scrap of parchment in his hands. Though he had not read it for some time, he was listening. His mother had guests. Travelers from the north. Their cloaks still carried the dust of the road, and their voices carried something else. Something harder to name. Not fear exactly, not excitement exactly, something in between. They spoke quietly at first, the way adults do when they believe children aren't paying attention. But the boy heard a name, Jesus. One of the travelers, leaning forward, lowered his voice. I saw him, the man said, with my own eyes. Another asked, are the stories true? The traveler hesitated, not as one inventing a story, but as one struggling to explain something that refused to fit inside of ordinary words. I saw a man who couldn't walk, he said slowly. Everyone knew him. He sat in that same place for years, begging. But when Jesus spoke to him, he stood. The room grew still. The boy held his breath. Another voice whispered, some are saying he may be the one. No one said the word Messiah aloud. Not yet. The lamp flickered, shadows moved along the walls. Outside, Jerusalem continued its ordinary rhythms. But inside that room, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The boy did not know it then, but the road that teacher was walking would one day lead directly to this city. It would lead to his street. It would intersect with his life. And far to the north, on a dusty road beneath an open sky, Jesus had already begun walking toward him. He had set his face toward Jerusalem. Luke writes in chapter 9:51, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. There are moments in history when everything pivots quietly. No trumpet sounds, no crown changing hands, no army advances across the battlefield. No one in the streets understands that the future has just been shifted beneath their feet. But heaven understands. Luke tells us that such a moment came not in Jerusalem, not on the cross, not in a garden, but on a road. Up to this point, Jesus had been moving through Galilee, village to village, synagogue to synagogue. He taught the scriptures as if he had written them. He did. He touched the sick as if disease had forgotten its authority. It had. He spoke to the broken as if their names had always belonged in his voice. Crowds followed him. Hope followed him. Questions followed him. But there came a moment when he stopped moving from place to place and chose a destination, Jerusalem. Luke tells us he set his face. It's a small phrase, but it carries enormous weight. It is the language of decision, the language of resolve, the language of a man who knows exactly where he's going and what exactly it will cost him once he gets there. The prophet Isaiah spoke words centuries earlier that now echo through this moment. I have set my face like flint, and I know that I shall not be put to shame. Jesus is not drifting towards Jerusalem. He's not being swept there by circumstance. He is walking there deliberately. Because Jerusalem is where the cross waits. And he knows it. He had already told his disciples plainly, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected and be killed. Luke 9:22. Not might, but must. This was not an interruption of his mission. This was his mission. And now he begins walking toward it openly. At first, the road feels familiar. Dust rises beneath their sandals. The sun follows its usual path across the sky. Villages appear and disappear behind them as they have so many times before. But something has changed. Those closest to him can sense it, though they cannot name it. His words carry a greater weight now. His silences last longer. His eyes seem fixed on something beyond the horizon. Beside him walks a woman named Mary. Months earlier, her life had been defined by darkness that she could not escape. Her mind had not been her own. Her voice had not always obeyed her. She lived in isolation, in fear and shame, until Jesus spoke, and everything changed. He had freed her, not only from torment, but from abandonment. He had spoken her name as if it mattered. He had looked at her as if she were not broken beyond repair. So now she walks behind him, not because she must, but because she cannot imagine walking anywhere else. She watches him carefully. She notices what others do not. The way he pauses sometimes, as if listening to something only he can hear. The way he looks towards Jerusalem, not with fear, but certainty. She does not know what awaits him there, but she knows he is walking towards it on purpose. As Jesus walks, the crowd grows. Some follow because they believe he might be the Messiah. Some follow because they hope he will overthrow Rome. Some follow because they've seen what he can do and like those free Happy Meals. Others follow because they're afraid of what he might become. And among them walk the disciples, men who have seen miracles with their own eyes and still struggle to understand what lies ahead. They imagine thrones. They imagine victory. They imagine Jerusalem welcoming him as a king. They do not yet imagine a cross. Jesus does. And still he walks. As he draws closer to Judea, his words begin to sharpen. He speaks of cost. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. The words hang in the air. Cross? It is not a poetic image. It's an instrument of execution. The disciples hear the word, but they do not accept its meaning. How could the Messiah speak of crosses? How could victory look like surrender? Mary hears these words too. She does not fully understand them, but she feels their gravity. She wonders what kind of road he is walking, and she keeps walking behind him. In Jerusalem, the city prepares for Passover. Pilgrims will soon arrive by the thousands. Roads will fill, homes will fill, the temple courts will fill. John Mark helps his family prepare. He does his chores. He runs errands. He listens. More travelers arrive. More stories circulate. The teacher from Galilee is moving south toward Jerusalem. Some say he's raised the dead. Some say religious leaders hate him and want to get rid of him. Some say he may come for Passover. John Mark hears these words and feels something stir inside him. He doesn't know why. He's never seen Jesus. But he senses that if this man comes to Jerusalem, everything may change. On the road, Jesus continues walking. Villages welcome him. Others reject him. Opposition grows more open and fierce. Questions become accusations. Accusations become threats. Still, he does not turn aside. Because before the nails, there was a decision. Before the cross was lifted, there was a road. Before the sacrifice was made, there was a turning point. He set his face. He chose his path. Not because he was forced, but because he loved. He loved the disciples who still misunderstood him. He loved Mary, walking quietly behind him. He loved a boy in Jerusalem who did not yet know how deeply his own life would be marked by what was coming. He loved the crowds who one day would shout his praise and days later shout for his death. He loved those who would stand near him, those who would run. He loved them all. He loves us all. And so he walked toward betrayal, toward suffering, toward death, toward redemption. Every life has turning points. Moments when direction becomes decision. Moments when faith becomes obedience. Jesus' turning point was not toward safety, but toward sacrifice. He walked toward Jerusalem so that we would never walk towards judgment alone. Mary did not yet know she would stand near his cross. John Mark did not yet know that one day he would run in fear when soldiers came. Neither knew what grace would find them both. Jesus knew, because he was walking towards them as he is walking towards us. So as we prepare our hearts for communion, we remember not only the cross, but the decision that led to it. The cross did not begin in Golgotha. It began when Jesus set his face towards Jerusalem. It began when he chose obedience over escape. It began when he chose love over safety. On the road, he carried not only his own steps, but ours. Every doubt, every failure, every fear, every sin, it all lay ahead of him. And still, he walked. Amen.